Hi everyone, it's Martina, and today we're going to talk about one of the most common questions I get from homeowners to call me about going solar. Which direction should I put my panels on? Is south always the best? Maybe your home faces the street and your HOA won't allow panels facing the front of the home, or you just have beautiful mature trees that are on the south side and your spouse will not agree to cut the tree down. So can east and west actually be as smart, maybe even better in some cases? And how does that play out here in Dallas, Texas, compared to other parts of the US where climate, sunlight angle, and the electric rates are totally different? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how panel direction affects production, what that means for your power bill, and why sometimes mixing east and west and south can give you surprisingly good results. Oh, and before I forget, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your comments down below. It helps my channel grow so much. So thank you for that. And now let's get right to the video. Solar panels generate the most energy when sunlight hits them directly. In the US, especially in the southern states like Texas or in Arizona or California, the ideal direction is usually south because the sun travels across the southern part of the sky for most of the day. So yes, south-facing panels typically produce the most total energy in a year, but that does not automatically translate to the smartest choice for your specific home. Here in Dallas, we get about 250 sunny days per year. That's fantastic. But sunlight intensity changes a lot throughout the day. So if you look at a production graph for south-facing system, there's a pretty big spike between around 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. That's when the production peaks. Ironically, this is also the times that most homes use the least amount of electricity. People are at work, kids are at school, and the air conditioning hasn't really fully ramped up yet to cool down the house. So much of that midday power goes back to the grid instead of being used inside your home. With east and west facing panels, it's a completely different story. East-facing panels starts early, pretty much around 7 a.m., and west-facing panels keep producing later into the afternoon and even early evening. Now, the total output might be a bit lower, but production happens during the hours that you actually need that power. East-west systems spread energy generation more evenly throughout the day. Now, in late afternoons, when temperatures soar and everyone turns on their AC, west-facing panels really shine. They produce energy right when the grid is most stressed and electricity is most expensive. In northern states like Michigan, Minnesota, or New York, the sun sits lower in the sky, especially in the winter. So south-facing roofs are still pretty much the most efficient. Meanwhile, in places like California or Arizona, utilities charge a higher rate in the afternoon and in the evening, so west-facing panels can actually save you more energy, even if total yearly output is actually lower. Now, most houses in Texas have east and west facing roofs. That's just how our neighborhoods are designed and built. So people ask me all the time, is it even worth it for me to go solar if my roof is directly facing south and I just have east and west as my option? And most of the time my answer is, it really depends. So here in North Texas, the production difference between a south-facing and an east-west system is usually about 10 to 15%, sometimes 20 if the roof is pretty steep. But remember, you often use more of that east-west energy yourself instead of sending it back to the grid. And if you add a battery to store that excess daytime power and use it at night, those direction differences become basically almost irrelevant when it comes to having a battery with your solar system. And then a south-facing system gives you a big midday peak and the largest annual total, but also the biggest midday surplus. That's that energy that you might not need at that particular moment of production. So an east and west layout produces a flatter curve, less at noon, more in the morning and evening. And that's exactly why many commercial solar farms use east and west layouts, because they want to smooth the production and avoid big noon spikes that can overload the grid. Sometimes it's not even allowed. Now, this approach is very common in California, Nevada, and New Mexico, where utilities face frequent midday overproduction. For homes, especially here in Texas, a mix is often the best solution. For example, you can place some panels facing south for maximum yearly output and others west for valuable late-day production. Now, that combination gives you a balanced energy profile, more usable power during high consumption hours, less wasted midday energy, and often a quicker ROI. Now, in Dallas, the ideal tit for south-facing panels is around 15 to 25 degrees. East and west-facing systems work best at slightly lower angle, about 10 to 20 degrees, to capture sunlight longer as it moves across the sky. Now, in northern states, installers go steeper, up to 40 degrees, to improve winter performance. But none of that matters if your panels are shaded. So shading is like a solar killer. It's one of the most overlooked factors that can destroy solar production. So it doesn't matter how expensive or efficient your panels are, if even a small portion of the array is shaded during key hours, your output will drop significantly. Modern panels are built with bypass diodes, so we no longer experience the old Christmas light effect, where if one shaded panel basically shuts down the entire row, but still, shading can easily limit performance if the system isn't designed correctly. This is why proper string sizing and accurate layout planning are absolutely critical in maximizing your production too. And I think this is also why some installers used to be very pro microinverters, because it took out the needed brain to design a very efficient system. It was just easier for them to do. They didn't really have to think. Now, each roof surface behaves differently. Angles, obstructions, and even vent pipes or chimneys can affect how sunlight moves throughout the day. So before any installation begins, your installer should perform a very detailed shade analysis to confirm that the panels stay clear of shadows during the most productive hours of the year. Even if you don't have any trees, there's other things shading those panels. Now, I also did an actual shading test on like real panels out here at our facility to show what happens when part of a module is covered and how much power drops and what you can expect in real life. So you can watch that test later on. I'm gonna link it down below. You would be shocked with how little leaf, like the size of my palm, can affect panel's performance. Now, I also had a customer in McKinney who really insisted on putting every panel on his south-facing roof because that's where they make the most amount of power. Now, on paper, it looked perfect. In reality, a large oak tree was shading half of that roof after 2 p.m. As a result, the calculation came that his system produced less energy than his neighbor's west-facing system that had zero shade. So remember, a clear east or west-facing roof is always better than a shaded south-facing one. Now, modern design software can simulate all of these scenarios. We can show you annual production, real kilowatt-hour differences, and estimated savings based on your utility's rate. In much of Texas, east-west systems perform almost as well as south-facing ones, and sometimes even better because these panels run cooler during the midday. Lower temperatures mean higher efficiency and longer lifespans. But the biggest point is whether or not you have net metering and you have a battery. So looking at real data in Dallas, Texas, a 10 kilowatt south-facing system typically produces around 14,000 kilowatt hours per year. Not 15,000, not 16, not even 17,000 like some salespeople will tell you. But the same system that's facing east and west is going to be closer to 12,500 kilowatt hours, which is about 10% less. But since households use most power in the morning or evening, actual bill savings can end up almost identical because your east-west panel produced power when you need it, not when the grid is flooded with cheap midday energy, or designing a system that only is basically west-facing instead of east and west if you don't use much electricity in the morning hours. Now, on a commercial scale, these differences become very strategic. So many big solar farms alternate rows east and west to create an ultra-flat generation curve that delivers steady power from sunrise all the way to sunset. Now, as more homes add batteries, direction matters less and less. Batteries capture the midday surplus and release it later in the evening. Still, orientation and tilt remain important for efficiency and for longevity. But if you have one-to-one net metering, the orientation does not matter. Get the system that generates the most amount on the annual basis. Now, if you don't have one-to-one net metering and you don't include batteries, then you need to have a longer conversation with your installer and look at different options. There's not a single best direction for everyone. Now, in Texas, South gives you the highest annual output, but if your goal is to use as much of that energy yourself, not sell it back to the grid, a mix of East and West can be a very cost-effective solution. Now, in northern states, South will still win because of how lower where the sun angle is. On the West Coast, where evening electricity rates are the highest, west-facing panels often deliver the biggest amount of savings if no battery is included. But again, no matter where you live, remember this golden rule. There's no good direction in the shade. Even the best panels will not help if trees, chimneys, or another row blocks the sun from hitting the panels. Good solar design always starts with clear, direct, uninterrupted, or as uninterrupted sunlight. So before signing a contract, ask your installer to run a shading and orientation analysis, look at hourly production, compare that with your home's usage, and see how to balance your system for the lowest possible electricity bill. Every roof, every family, and every energy pattern is unique, and the best direction for you is one that keeps your home bright, efficient, and free of shade. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video, and remember to subscribe and comment down below. Bye.